absolutely adore this movie. I watch this movie at least once a year, usually when I'm really looking for inspiration or when I'm missing England a lot and I want to connect back to England. I adore this movie. Now, just to be, particularly fair,
To be fair,
it came out in 1981. So you have to look at things like CGI didn't exist, right? A lot of the special effects that you might think of today didn't exist. So they did a tremendous amount with lighting. That was the real special effect that they used a lot of in this movie, was really clever lighting. But I'm going to tell you all the things I love about this movie before Jason and others destroy it for you. So first, the interesting thing about this movie, like when it came out, and Heather mentioned a bunch of other movies that were sort of around at the same time or came after it. If you go back and you watch that list of movies, it's not supposed to be in England. Okay. So if you go look at other movies that were around at the time, this was the heaviest of the movies. It was weighty. If you watch some of the first scenes that come out, there's a thudding to the horse's hooves that you didn't find in other movies. There was heavy armor that was laborious to move around in. There's scenes where they're fighting in mud and blood and streams and whatnot. And it's a really hard slog. There's nothing easy about these fighting scenes. And if you look at all the movies that were done before, it was sort of the swashbuckling, daring do, very light armor, people running around. So this was the first movie that had some heft to it and some weight to it and a real darkness to it. And that was particularly different. There was also, again, for the time, lots of squishy, thuddy sounds as axes and swords and whatnot pierced armor. And that was really, really different. And then it also did an interesting thing, I think, where, rather than the Thomas Mallory version of, the Arthur stories, this was more like the Gretchen Detroit movies and writings. And so it was a little bit older. It mixed up some of the mythology a little bit, but in an interesting way. That it told bits of the story, like the Fisher King and the Wasteland. Like it puts all of that in there that had never been in a movie before. So although the mythology is a little mixed, it points to some really interesting parts of these myths, which were, depending on what sources you believe, they were, French Romantic, they were early Britain, they were holdovers from, the period after the Dark Ages, after the fall of the Roman Empire, and so all kinds of things like that, and historically some neat places in as well. It talks about Cornwall and Tintagel, which are real places in England, or at the time, sort of Britain, as it would have been. But yeah, it's got some really neat pieces in it, and that's what I love about it. Not to mention, I know Jason disagrees. I love the music, even though some of it was odd choices. There's some brilliant music in it. When they play, what is it? Carmina Burana. Yeah, it's absolutely stunning as Arthur's coming back to life.
It's embarrassing and a cliche.
And the only thing that I can think of
was the man with the 1980s perm.